It's a great privilege and honor to have our village board trustee, Mayor Eklund, and our village trustees will be here. They are having the budget meeting, so they are a little late. But we have library board president Ginger Crosby is here, and Mrs. Edith Glass, and members of the Memoir group and their families and friends with us. I can't believe it was 5 years ago when we started this program, and some of the members are still with us from the beginning. And I especially like to thank our friends of the library who are sponsoring this program. Because of them, this program is possible, and you guys meet every month. So it's a pleasure to present Mrs. Edith Glass.
Thank you for joining us today. And today we are joined by members of the Tuckahoe Library. Our group meets monthly to share newly recorded snapshots of people and events in our lives. The meetings are conducted in a non-critical manner, and this nurturing, supportive environment has allowed our group to become a family. All of us now live in Westchester. However, some of us were born in the United States and others have come to live here from other countries. Today, more Americans are considering the legacies they want to leave their descendants, including their personal histories. We all realize that if our life experiences are not recorded for our descendants, they will be lost forever. We hope that after you hear our memory, you will begin to write your own. Please stay for the reception after the program. And I'm going to start off first because if some people are a little late, it will give them a chance to get. And my name is Edie Glass, born in New York City. I now live in Chappaqua, New York. And my memoir is titled Miss Hanukkah. My mother, Radar Skelton, was brought up in an unusual Jewish home. Her English father, Mark Skidden, came from a very Orthodox Jewish family and was not happy with the strictness of the religion. When he was offered the Chicago position as manager of the Hart, Schaffner and Marx manufacturing plant, a company that produced fine men's apparel, he decided to move himself, his wife Janet, and 3 daughters, Raynor, Frances, and Beatrice, from Liverpool to Chicago. They settled in a city of Chicago that had a low Jewish population. He changed the family name from Skelton to Skelton and sent his daughters to a neighborhood Christian Sunday school. Asked my grandmother for permission to allow her children to be angels in the Christmas pageant, but she did not consent to the minister's request, and my mother would often laugh at how she missed becoming an angel. It was not recognized as an important religious holiday when my mother was growing up. They were not exchanged. Perhaps the children were given some geld, which is Yiddish for money, to spend on candy. Grandpa Skelton must have loved the spirit of Christmas season. The festivities of the season really got to him, and he would dress up as Santa Claus. Everyone in the family hung their holiday stockings and exchanged gifts on Christmas Day. It was a day of joy and happiness and was not considered a religious holiday. My mother was also a great believer in Santa Claus, and she was willing to wait in the long Santa line at Company, a department store in New York City, so that her grandchildren could sit on his knee. My mother and her sisters all married non-religious Jewish men who were secular Jews. We were a non-observant Jewish family. I cannot remember attending high holy days, religious services with my parents. Even if I did not light Sabbath candles every Friday night, I knew that I was a Jewish child. My brother Jerry and I went to Temple Emmanuel for our Jewish education. At home we celebrated such holidays as Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Passover, and exchanged gifts on Christmas. It was hard not to get caught up in the beauty of the season. In school, we sang beautiful Christmas carols. The stores were shiny with beautiful sparkling and decorations. It was fun to go ice skating at Rockefeller Center and see the enormous Christmas tree decorated with many different colored lights. The windows of the department stores glittering holiday scenes, and on every street one could see Santa Claus ringing his holiday bell. It was fun to walk on Fifth Avenue eating a bag of hot chestnuts and feeling the special kindly spirit of the people walking by. It was difficult not to sing songs such as Jingle Bells or Deck the Halls up to myself as I walked along the streets. We never had a Christmas tree in our home. We had a faux fireplace and an area that we would hang up our stockings on Christmas Eve. The next morning they would be filled with fruit and things. Then came an hour of excitement when we gave each other gifts and happily them open, scattering brightly colored wrapping paper everywhere. This was my favorite morning of the entire year, filled only with happiness. I never remember being disappointed with any of my gifts, since I knew they were given with love from my parents. The only thing that was wrong with Christmas, it took too long for this happy holiday to return. One year, I almost ruined Christmas. I was 10 years old, and I knew that sometimes my mother would go to the store to buy our gifts. One day, when my mother was shopping at the Safeway food market, and my search of the apartment. I just couldn't wait until Christmas morning. I wanted to know immediately what gifts I was going to receive, and I searched the shelves of the closets. Nothing was there. I searched my father's dresser, but nothing was there. I finally my mother's dresser. I searched the first drawer and found nothing. I searched the second drawer and found nothing. I hit it big when I searched the third drawer. There, under some clothes, a small black box. I carefully opened the box, and there in front of my eyes was a beautiful watch. I placed it back where I found it, and I carried this delightful secret with me all the days before Christmas. Of course, on Christmas Day, I had to fake my surprise and excitement. I couldn't let my parents believe that I wasn't surprised or delighted with this beautiful gift. I didn't enjoy faking it. I felt dishonest. Never again in my entire life have I searched for or looked at a gift before I was supposed to receive it. The beauty of the watch had been diminished. Every time I looked at my new gold watch, it reminded me that I had been faithful. I had ruined my happiest day of the year. But I had learned an important lesson. When we moved to Chappaqua, our children attended Temple Bethel and its Reformed Hebrew school. As a family, we would attend this synagogue on important holidays. We celebrated Hanukkah with an exchange of gifts and eating latkes, a special holiday treat. We never had a Christmas tree in our home. When we moved into our new home in Chappaqua, Fred, my asked where I was going to place my Hanukkah bush. I didn't know what he was talking about. He explained that some of his Jewish clients had a Hanukkah bush that looked just like a Christmas tree. My Aunt Hannah's children, Susan and Stephen, sometimes had a small Christmas tree in their home. Aunt Beatrice's children, Stanley, Lewis, and Paul, hung their stockings but did not have a tree. Francis's children, Janet and Dorothy, had a Christmas tree every year. Dorothy was born on December 15th. My Aunt Frances and Uncle Milton brought her home from the hospital on Christmas Day. And when they arrived, they placed Dorothy all wrapped up in her blanket under the tree. She was a special present for my cousin Janet. I still enjoy the holiday season. I love Christmas carols sung and seeing the beautiful lights of the city's holiday decorations. The spirit of peace on earth and goodwill towards man is something that is needed in our world. Yes. We have a duo.
My name is Mary Horvath. I was born in Hungary, Europe. Proud of it. Anyway, I wanted to tell you, Elaine, to read the story that I wrote many years ago, because it just kills me to read about it. The terrible thing that happened to us.
Where do you live now?
Oh, I live in what else? Okay. So she's gonna read it.
Okay, good. It's working.
Put it right near your mouth.
It was kind of going in and out. The 56 rebels. The happy times were dampened by the ever unsteady political atmosphere in Eastern Europe. While the older people struggled to keep alive, the younger generation was flexing their muscles against the big red star. The news was disturbing. There was unrest in East Germany. The Czechs tried to break their shackles. The East Germans crossed the border and realized how much better life was in West Germany. Between the two Germanies, the East erected a barbed wire fence filled with electric power and devoted guards with savage dogs. Young men and women trying to escape were shot and died under the barbed wire. In Czechoslovakia, poets and authors wrote patriotic articles to arouse the population. The situation was similar in Hungary. College students gathered and recited the famous Hungarian poet's words. Hungarians, the motherland is calling. The time has arrived. Now. In Budapest, poets and artists met. Crowds gathered first in secret, then on the main square. They were singing, chanting, "Free Hungary." This behavior was unacceptable. Police units were ordered to disperse the crowds. The revolutionary ideas of the hearts, minds, the streets, and the countryside. On the main square was a huge statue of Stalin. Crowds gathered around the hated statue. All of a sudden, the crowd attacked it with sticks, stones. The crowd yelled, "Get rid of the red devil." As the crowd pushed, they finally toppled the statue. The story was told by Memoir, who had taken part in this attack. The army was ordered to put down the revolution, and they came in great numbers. Tanks rolled in to and around Budapest. Some people went. The young people were inspired by the flame of revolution. They stood in front of the tanks, looking right into the eyes of the soldiers, and begged them, "You can't shoot us, brother. Come with us, brother." Many of the soldiers went over to the side of the revolution. They took their tanks and weapons with them. People gathered in the square carrying lighted candles. With tears streaming down many faces, they sang. There had been no singing in the square for years because of all the pain, but this time they were singing because they had hope. Finally, after a few hours, people left. The square quieted down. The wind was blowing dried autumn leaves around the falling, faded statue. All this happened on the 26th of October, 1956. The night did not go unnoticed. Radio Free Europe, BBC, Voice of America, all reported the events. People all over Hungary listened to the latest news. The communist government tried to quiet things down, but the fire of freedom and hope had taken this ravaged country called Hungary. Many soldiers deserted the Red Army. Miners, farmers, factory workers, students all joined in. The tanks still roamed the streets. There were shots fired from both sides. People injured and killed. Still, for a new government were made. The secret police members were arrested, some killed. Political prisoners were freed. The torture cells exposed to the world. Young Charles Horvath and fellow workers in the main office were organizing. People ripped off the flags. Red, white, and green was hoisted. There was hope. There was hope. Glorious Hungarians could not believe the news. The Russian army was leaving Hungary, but the joy was not long-lived. Imre Nagy, the prime minister, and General Molotov were captured and executed by a communist faction. The Soviet army returned, and with them pain, cruelty, darkness, and barbarism. The date was the 4th of November, 1956. The communists took back schools, factories, bridges, and buildings. The radio towers were the last to fall into red hands. One could hear the announcer beg for help from the west. One could hear the crackle of the machines, then silence. The square in Budapest became a killing field. Tanks were protesters, killing them. People were shot on sight. Heavy machinery was brought. Graves dug in the streets. Lots of young revolutionaries were buried right under the asphalt. Jails were quickly filled again. Trials were quick, brutal. Youngsters as young as 14 and 15 were condemned to die. To international laws, the death sentences would not be carried out until their 18th birthday. The day after their birthday, these children were executed.
We have to think about it because right now here the Soviet Union is doing funny things all over the place. I don't want ever to forget it. Is your son here? Just in time.
My name is Eva Bartalos. I was born in also in Budapest, Hungary. Hungarian today. I now live in Bronxville, New York. By the way, I happened to be a teenager when that happened. My memoir is titled Thanksgiving 2013. Can you hear it, Clara?
I don't think we're anybody was here.
I was looking forward Thanksgiving this year. Greg, my son, and his wife decided it will be at their house in Scarthville, New York. Winter holidays are here. Milo is a very good cook, so we knew the dinner will be delicious. Clara, my granddaughter, could hardly wait to taste the chocolate what I will bring. I wanted to be there about 4:30 and packed carefully. I promised lima beans for Clara, what she loves. Also, I bought a strange-looking cheese bread and some raisin nut rolls. When I arrived, I could smell the pork loin roast and the aroma of the vegetables. But when the question arose, where is the cake? I didn't answer. I forgot to bring the cake. I had to go home, but luckily I live only about 70 minutes from the house. Clara in the kitchen. She peeled the potatoes. She has grown lately a lot. I was looking forward to mashed potatoes, what she helped to cook. While the parents started to set the table and serve, Clara worked on a math book. She is very good with numbers. We also watched a little TV. Finally, we sat, raised our glasses to a happy Thanksgiving and thought of all the good things we can give thanks for. The roasted pork loin and the cabbage, the corn, tomatoes were delicious. We all praised Clara's mashed potatoes.
There was also a tasty cauliflower soup. The chocolate cake was rich and sweet. There will be a lot of food for the next few days. After dinner, Clara showed me her new toy, the moon. With the remote control, she can have half moon or full moon, or we can just be in the dark room. So we go to her room. Then we imagined that we were on the North Pole. And first it was very, very dark. We could not see each other, and we were laughing. Then we had a quarter, then a half moon, and finally full moon. Then the wolves started to howl, and the soft animals came one after the other. The bears, the wolves, the penguins, the huskies came. And I told Clara how they raced while pulling the sleds. Soon we were racing, and her huskies won, of course, most of the time. We had such a good time playing this game with the huskies and the moon. This year, Uncle Mike, Lily, Andre, Bruno, Uncle Gabe, and Mia could not join us, but we hope they and Mai, Ian, Sean, Jenna, James, Sophia, and Samantha had a happy Thanksgiving too. May all of us continue to appreciate all the good things we have in our lives, and let's not forget the small joys which are so wonderful and make us happy, like children's smiles, a card, someone peeling potatoes. As I drove home, I smiled at the moon.
My name is Elaine Foley. I was born in Mars Hospital, Elaine McComb, but I really grew up in Tuckahoe. Mostly on River Street, and I'm still there. Happily. And the name of my memoir is Remembering Christmas. Holiday movie. The name of my memoir is Remembering Christmas. It was a cold day in mid-December 2011 when I decided, after having lunch at the bistro with my good friends Mary and Jill, to venture up the hill to Cornell's Harbor Store in Eastchester. It is a favorite landmark in our community, always fulfilling our household needs in one way or another. The crowded aisles and nooks and crannies delight at every turn with unexpected surprises. The sky was beginning to darken as I pulled into the parking lot, but the cold, crisp air was filled with the excitement of the coming day, and I almost felt gleeful as I approached the entrance and opened the welcoming door. As I entered the busy store, I was immediately overwhelmed with feelings of nostalgia by the wonderful sights and sounds before me. The colorful Christmas decorations in the crowded aisles and the lovely carols playing softly in the background transport me back in time to beloved childhood memories of Christmas and Cornell's Hardware Store, when it was located on Lake Avenue in Tuckahoe, 2 blocks from my house. Christmas seemed much simpler in those days, but there was always a blessed excitement attached to this most beautiful holiday. I especially remember one Christmas Eve afternoon when I was about 8 years old, and my brother, who was 2 years older, walked all the way up Main Street and Winter Hill Road from our house on River Street to the Immaculate Conception Church in order to go to confession, preparation for Christmas morning Mass. I was an innocent babe, of course, but the spiritual blessing of God's love in that quiet, darkened church deeply touched my soul and remains there still. After confession, I walked back down the steep towards the village below was enhanced somehow by the approaching darkness, and seemed to cast a warm glow onto everything in sight. After passing the old billboard between Washington and Jefferson Streets and encountering Zanzano's barber shop and Miss Anna's candy store, Julian Ulrich's grocery, the Victoria Laundry, and Masonic Temple, we finally began to feel the comfort of the more familiar when we approached the telephone company and our beloved Main Street School, located deep in the heart of our village, and heard the melodic strains of joyful Christmas carols emanating from the speakers at Village Hall and Depot Square. They truly sounded heavenly. It had begun to snow, and we added to the ambience as we passed our illustrious Lyric Theater and quaint little 10-cent store with its tinsel draped window and seasonal lures. Being out on this holiest of eves was like a gift to me because I was so young and it seemed so special and magical. We knew, of course, we were almost home when we crossed the bridge to Emil Heck's candy store and Sammy's delicatessen, but it was the colored window at Cornell's hardware store that beckoned to us and truly touched our hearts. We relished standing before its brightly decorated window, enthralled by its sparkling display. I can still see the large wooden flexible flyer sled standing before us, the brilliant white Sonia Henny ice skates hanging by its side, colorful games and paint sets, and the ominous red-wired BB gun tucked up in the corner to thrill my brother, along with his dreams of a chemistry set, Lionel electric train set. But my eyes beheld the lovable dolls, like the diaper who actually wept, and the famous Shirley Temple doll. She was smiling at me from her box, her dimples and blonde curls capturing my heart completely. In quiet anticipation, we prayed that several of the wonderful prizes before us would be under our tree in the morning before reluctantly leaving this magical window and venturing home in the snow street where we knew our mother would be preparing our favorite fish dinner with baked macaroni and cheese. I can remember feeling so happy and contented, knowing we would be putting up the Christmas tree with our loving parents and eager to help. In those days, the trees were large and the lights were multicolored and gigantic, and if one went out, they all did. And we were hanging up the old glass ornaments, and especially loved throwing the tinsel on the branches. No matter how bedraggled the tree might look to others, to our eyes and heart it was simply beautiful. We also hung up our stockings, actual knee-highs, on the mantle because we didn't have a fireplace. If we were bad, they would only be cold in stocking, but if good, they would be Christmas tangerines and walnuts. Thankfully, it was never cold. I can still remember the thrill of finding Shirley Temple under the tree on Christmas morning, and the electric train my brother. He would wickedly put a piece of tinsel on the tracks for the train to roar and burn. It would always sizzle and crackle. Scare me a little. Such excitement. Wonderful memories of Christmas past, all triggered by opening the door to Cornell's hardware store and feeling the blessings and magic of Christmas.
Oh, wow. Did you find it?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome my grandma Connie Violente. The name of Memoir is Fanny's Pizza. My mother-in-law, Fanny, is one of the best cooks.
Okay.
She can make an egg taste like a gourmet meal. She loved to cook for the family. On Sundays, we would all go to her house in Astoria for dinner.
Oh, your
Sunday
house.
dinner
Oh, okay.
was always between 3 and 4 o'clock, and we would sit at the dining room table for hours eating and talking. Fanny always started dinner with an antipasto, followed by pasta and then many different entrees, including fresh vegetables cooked to perfection. There was always salad and Italian bread, and we ended with dessert and coffee. Of course, we all overate. Every Sunday dinner at Fanny's was like a holiday. There were Sundays when all Fanny's 6 children were there, and there were times when grandchildren also showed up. And there were times when only some of the family was there. However, no matter how many of us were at the dinner table, Fanny always had enough food for the whole family, any guests that happened to show up. Sunday was a holiday at Fanny's. Fanny loved to come to our house in Tuckahoe for a visit, and she would say she was staying for the weekend, and with our coaxing, she would stay at 2 to 4 weeks. We never wanted her to leave. Fanny and I would stay up after everyone went to sleep and play canasta until the wee hours, even though I had to go to work the next day. She loved the children, and they loved her stories and her cooking. Whenever Fanny came to stay with us, we always requested her to make her famous pizza, known as focaccia. Fanny's pizza was delicious and was a work of art and love. She started making the dough for the pizza early in the morning. She boiled potatoes, always had to be Idaho potatoes, to make mashed potatoes. Fanny would the potatoes until they were very soft and then add salt, butter, and milk. She would empty flour onto the kitchen table and add the potatoes and yeast. Fanny never measured the ingredients and eyeballed everything. The ingredients were all mixed together by hand. She would make 2 good balls with the dough. She would take one ball and place it in my very large Pyrex baking dish, cover it with a towel, and let the dough rise. The other ball of dough she would tell me to freeze so that I could make the pizza when she wasn't there. The Pyrex dish in which she made the pizza was very large and heavy. You would be able to cook a 25 to 30 pound turkey in it, and it was her favorite dish. It was the only dish she would use to make the pizza. Consequently, it was only used by her for pizza and became known as Fanny's Pyrex. Once the pizza dough was fully raised, which usually took hours, she would keep it covered with a towel until it was time to bake. When it was time to bake the pizza, the oven had to be preheated to 325 degrees. Fanny then added her signature tomato sauce, very little mozzarella cheese, as well as locatelli grating cheese. Then the extra heavy Pyrex dish was put into the preheated oven. Once the pizza was fully cooked, the Pyrex dish was taken out of the oven and the pizza was left to stand a few minutes before it was cut. The pizza was as big and as high as the Pyrex dish, and covered every inch of the dish. It was time to eat the pizza. I can still taste the delicious pizza. Of course, we never left one single one. Even though it was a full day process to make the pizza, it took maybe 1 hour to devour it. Remember I said the heavy extra large Pyrex dish was Fanny's favorite dish. Well, right after Fanny passed away, I took the Pyrex dish to the closet I kept it in, and it was cracked. I hadn't used the Pyrex dish since Fanny last visited us and always kept it by itself on a shelf in the closet because it was so large. There was never any explanation for the crack, but it was clear I could never use it again. It is my feeling that the Pyrex was telling me if Fanny is gone, no one else is going to use me to make pizza or anything else. My next memoir is called Cemetery Visits. Growing up in an Italian family, there are certain traditions that must be followed. One of these traditions is visiting relatives even if they are deceased. This means visiting different grave sites in the cemetery on holidays. These holidays include Christmas, a Christmas wreath or blanket is placed on the grave, and New Year, weather permitting. The most important days to visit the cemetery are Memorial Day as well as the date of the deceased's death. My mother, godmother, Aunt Lucy, and Aunt Florence were the queens of Italian tradition. These traditions including believing in the evil eye. Therefore, every time I had a headache, someone rubbed oil on my head. When I was growing up, I was expected to accompany my mother, godmother, and aunt to the cemetery. The modes of transportation to bring us to our visit to the cemetery were usually the subway or bus. The cemetery we usually visited was St. Raymond Cemetery in the Bronx. We would get there in time to participate in an outdoor mass that was celebrated at the cemetery. My godmothers, Aunt Lucy's and Aunt Florence's husband were all buried in St. Raymond Cemetery, as was my stepfather. When I was old enough to drive, our mode of transportation was changed to a car, and I was elected to drive to the cemetery. After I married Tony, at certain times when my sister-in-law was not able to drive my mother-in-law to St. Charles Cemetery in Farmingdale, Long Island, to visit the graves of Tony's father and Fanny's grandson Jackie, who died at age 24, Tony and I were elected to drive her. I decided after my mother and godmother passed away that going to the cemetery to visit the deceased was not what I wanted to do. I felt that going to the cemetery was the only way to keep them alive in my memory. Therefore, I now occasionally visit the cemetery on the days instilled in my brain by my mother, godmother, Aunt Lucy, and Aunt Florence. Whenever I get the chance, I always visit the graves before Christmas and put a Christmas wreath on the grave. My mother-in-law passed away in 1995, and Tony and I used to drive up to St. Charles Cemetery in Farmingdale, Long Island, because that is where she is buried. Tony passed away in 2009, and I was able to secure a grave for him close to home, Holy Mount Cemetery in Eastchester. I find myself visiting his grave more often than I ever visited any of the graves of my ancestors. I don't know the reason for these constant visits. I not only visit his grave on the days I always accompanied my mother, godmother, and aunts, but I find myself at his gravesite at least once a week. Is this because the cemetery is so close to my home, or because I cannot get over the fact that he passed away? I still feel that keeping the deceased in your thoughts and memory is better than visiting a grave. Nevertheless, I cannot stop. The one thing I have never enforced is to insist that my children accompany me to grave sites. I have broken the tradition established by my mother, godmother, and aunt. The children know where the bodies are buried, and if they want, they visit whenever it suits them.
Hello, good morning everybody. My name is Carol Michaels. I was born in New York City and I live up here. And my memoir is called Slugged. Gardening, it is said, can be good for one's health, except when it isn't. As a lover of most things green, and due to the sad fact of a lifelong condition of yard deprivation, I have always focused my passion for such inside my apartment, that is. As a child growing up in a family of nature lovers, I was frequently exposed to its bounty, despite our living in an apartment. My father would often take me out of the city to go fishing or to explore the wilds of Bear Mountain, both of which excursions introduced me to all manner of growing things, critters included. Closer to home, my grandfather, also an avid, knowledgeable aficionado of plants and animals, would take me to the local park, Fort Tryon, in Upper Manhattan. There, as we strolled beside the stone-walled flower beds, he would treat me to a loving and broadly encompassing tutorial, each blossom and tree, their names and nuances to be stored in my mind, to grow alongside my rapidly developing interest and love for all things nature. My mother, having grown up in country houses amid gardens and arbors, fields and fauna, brought that family history into our home in the form of houseplants, mostly philodendron. So it was perfectly natural that when I moved into my first apartment, I purchased my first plant. A pothos, I think it was. Some years later, a friend who'd expanded her horticultural repertoire beyond the ordinary did the same for mine, whetting my appetite for more exotic specimens. By vehicle of a few books, magazines, and a wonderful PBS program, Crockett's Victory Garden, I was thoroughly booked. Through all those years, my growing garden sported both the exotic and the pedestrian. In fact, there were very few varieties that I eschewed, and the greater the challenge, the better I liked it. For many years, my outside build supported a modest window box, which I filled with a very immodest plethora of flowers. The box, firmly anchored by a veritable cat's cradle of galvanized wire, sported all manner of blossoms from spring until, and sometimes even including, the fall. Each year I would lavishly stuff its self-composted soil with several assorted packs of plants. One year even underscoring them with small bulbs, which would come up for many successive seasons. In time, I learned, or perhaps just insisted, that the recommended spacing printed on the care labels of those plants were mere suggestions of rules that simply demanded to be broken, and break them I did. I wanted a veritable sea of color outside my window, not a prairie of brown medium. So it should come as no surprise that the first time I saw my present abode, I was greatly swayed by the presence of a generously window-endowed sunroom. I was smitten, and so my hunt for a new residence ended right there. When I first moved into my new apartment, the plants I brought from the city seemingly fell all over themselves with joy and good health. Even those that had never shown even the slightest inclination to bloom in my equally sunny New York City apartment, now putting on an extravaganza of gratitude and solidarity. I can hear their thanks even now. As I have left the perpetually bright sunroom windows bare of any covering, when I have gone in there at night, perhaps to admire the moon or just enjoy a friendly breeze, I have never found the need to turn on the light. One night, some years ago, while standing in front of the window, Something inside the room caught my eye. On a white wicker chair that lives beneath the window, I saw a large, somewhat long, dark shadow on the armrest nearest me. In other words, farthest from the sill. At first, I thought it must be a leaf, but I soon disabused myself of that notion. There were no plants of any sort overhanging the chair. And then it moved. I rapidly added 2 and 2 and came up with slug. Although I'd read about them in various books and magazines, until then I'd never actually come face to face with one, and thank God for that. But on that night, apparently, my luck had run out. It was one of those awful times in life when I wanted to look over my shoulder and say, "You take care of it. I'm out of here." But of course, there was no one there, so I was elected to do the horrors. To do battle with Mother Nature in one of her less endearing permutations. I quickly retrieved my rubber gloves from the kitchen, along with some sort of receptacle with which to transport the alien creature to his final resting place. Down the drain he went in good riddance, bad rubbish. I'll spare you, dear reader, the vivid details, as such cannot possibly be good for anyone's health. But I will say this: I pray that never again will I ever be slugged in my very own garden.
Hi, my name is Carmel Bellis, and I am the newest member of the memoir writing workshop. So the title of my memoir is My First Memoir. The most challenging aspect of writing your first memoir is how and where to begin. For me, it sets out when my parents immigrated to America from Italy. Mom arrived in 1912 at the age of 3, along with her mother and older brother. Her dad was already here preparing the arrival of his wife and children. Their ship docked in New York a day or 2 earlier than expected. Grandpa was scheduled to be there to meet them after they were cleared through Ellis Island, but because communications were non-existent, he was unaware of their early arrival. It was told that Grandma panicked because she didn't know a word of English, nor could she read or write. All she knew was that her husband lived in Tuckahoe. After finally finding an interpreter, the authorities managed to get her on a train bound for Tuckahoe. When she arrived at the station, there was no one there. After standing looking forlorn, a man approached and asked if she needed help. She gave him Grandpa's name, and fortunately, he knew exactly where to direct her. How frightening it must have been for her. Dad came to America when he was 17. He settled in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where his cousin lived. He left all things familiar, his parents, 4 brothers and 3 sisters, and his country, to come to America to find work and help support the family back home. Many years later, he traveled to Tuckahoe with his cousin, and there he met the love of his life, Mom. They eventually married and had 5 children. The first 2 girls were born healthy. The third pregnancy, however, did not go well. My baby brother died after being alive for just a day. Then 2 more girls were added, and I was the last and the baby. My growing up years were very happy. We were poor, but we didn't know it. All of us lived in a 3-room apartment. Not 3 bedrooms, 3 rooms. My mom and dad in their room, and all 4 girls were in the other room with 2 double beds. We had no living room and no television. We would sit at the dinner table and talk and sing, and after the dishes were done, we would listen to the radio. I think as a result of this, we became a strong, close unit. Even though my parents are gone, we're still very close. We do everything together, including travel. Someone once said that if one of us gets cut, we all bleed. Unfortunately, 9 years ago, we lost one of our sisters to cancer. Jean was not lucky enough to have children, but she left behind 4 nephews and 3 nieces who adored her. We still feel the void left by her of me with the fondest of memories. My grandparents' family grew to 9 children, 4 boys and 5 girls. Years later, when the grandchildren came, they totaled 19. Since we had no television and since the stores were closed on Sunday, we all gathered at Grandma's each week. There were games to play, and my aunts even set up a Sunday theater in the backyard where we would all dress up and act and sing. If it rained, the children were sent to the movie theater, the Lyric in Tuckahoe, which was also known as the Itch. What wonderful memories. One of my blessings is that I grew up in Tuckahoe. It was a small blue-collar community comprised of mostly Italians and black people. They were all laborers who worked the marble quarry, railroad, and construction. Very hard workers and humble people. We all got along famously. Today, when we see each other, it's like seeing family. They say that you never forget the kids you grew up with, and it's doubly true for the kids from Tuckahoe. As I mentioned earlier, we were poor but didn't know it because we were rich in love and fun with our family and our little village friends. My family has grown and grown. We still manage to get together every year at Christmas time. We rent the Fada Hall and everyone comes, the ones that live locally and the ones that need to travel. It is always so good for us to see each other and reminisce and catch up. How blessed am I?
My name is Josephine Lucia. I was born in Rochester. I now live in Tuckahoe. My memoir is titled A Tiny Bundle of Joy. On Friday, March 9th, my daughter, on Friday, March 9th, my daughter Barbara and I headed up to Lake George. The baby shower for my granddaughter Lorna was to be held following. Well, we arrived at the house, and when we got through the hugs and pleasant greetings, my son Andrew said, "Guess who's not going to make the baby shower?" Lorna's upstairs in labor. The baby was breech, and it was a bit worrisome at first. Another story unfolds. After an hour of labor pains at home, off they went to the hospital. My daughter and I went back to the Holiday Inn to await the phone call. After an hour of praying, the phone rang with the wonderful news of little Andrew James McCabe coming into the world, feet first, weighing in at 3 pounds 9 ounces. The doctor was smiling, so pleased that the little baby boy was very strong and healthy for a premature baby. All went well, praise God. Of course, there's no doubt that every baby born is a miracle from God. I have always thought that since I was a very young girl. However, in our hearts and minds, although Andrew James was a special miracle, he was 3 pounds 9 ounces and born on March 9th, the very date that his great-grandfather passed away 18 years ago. We want to believe that Bill was looking down on him from heaven. We are certain that my son Joseph up there had a hand in this also. My daughter and I were so thrilled that we went to see him an hour later. We were allowed to watch the new mom feed her son and see the new dad standing by his birthday with pride and joy. The new grandmother, Susan, brought the cake to the hospital for the nurses, and we all enjoyed a mini baby shower in the room, which was quite spacious. Some close friends stopped by and Lorna opened some gifts, including tiny outfits for the baby to wear home. We will never forget that day. little Drew now weighs over 4 pounds, 10 ounces, and is comfortable in his own special crib with lots of love around him. And I chose this because I was there for 2 whole weeks for his second birthday. So that was kind of a special moment. And it was delightful. He said good words every day. And I have 2 other great-grandsons, 10 years old, and a great-granddaughter, 18 years old. And I'm very blessed. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Danae, and Rivera Shanley, and I was born in the Bronx and grew up in Eastchester. My memoir is entitled Off to See the Desert, and it was written I wrote it last May when I was in Morocco. I was there by myself and I drove around Morocco. The drive down to Merzouga was quite an experience. The roads through the mountains are narrow and single lane for each side. There are many trucks which drive very slowly, and if you ever want to get to your destination, you have to pass them, which can be nerve-wracking. The views were spectacular. There were amazing red mountains and green palm trees with red houses scattered throughout. Make you wonder what it's like to live in a mountain a few miles walk up or down to get to the next house. Things got hotter and not quite so pretty as I got nearer to the city of Merzouga, which borders the desert. I saw all kinds of signs for accommodation, but none for the place where I had made a reservation. I started to get a little uneasy. I drove all the way to the end of the road, literally, as the road ended some short distance before the desert began. This endpoint was the stalking ground of all kinds of touts notorious for this area. I was besieged by a group of boys who took turns pushing each other aside and offering me hotels, guides, necklaces, trinkets. Men offered to take me to my hotel, but I was too nervous to trust any of them, so I just drove off hastily. When I finally arrived at the Tamarist, a woman came out to show me to my room. I knew that trips out to the desert departed around 5 and it was 4:30, so I wasted no time. Would it be possible for me to go to the desert tonight, I asked. She looked at me quizzically, then asked, "Do you speak French?" "No." "Spanish?" "A little," I said. "Quiero que visitar la Sahara." She stared at me blankly. "Chebi?" I asked. That's with the sand dunes in the area. Still, no recognition. "No one here speaks English?" I asked. She shook her head. I started to lose hope. Finally, she got on her cell phone, and a minute later I was talking to someone on the phone. "You are welcome," he said. "Thank you," I replied. "I'd like to go to the desert tonight. Is this possible?" He paused. "You want to go tonight?" My heart sank. I felt like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. "But I've come such a long way, traveled through the mountains and fought the evil touts just to see the desert dunes. We have a group of 10 going out tonight, leaving in 1/2 hour. Do you wish to join them?" I couldn't even contain myself. Yes, I do. Thank you." I didn't even ask any details. I just handed the phone back to the lady and rushed back to my room, wondering, what do you pack for a night in the desert? I got ready quickly and went out to the courtyard to wait. A young man showed up. "Are you joining us tonight?" he asked. "Yes." I was encouraged that he spoke English. As I sat there, more young people kept showing up, asking where I was from, where had I come from, how long was I staying, where else was I going. I asked them all where they were from. England, Spain, Italy, Germany, Indonesia. It was quite a diverse crowd. The guy who had spoken to me first was from Georgia, in the U.S. He explained that they were all students in a school in Rabat that taught Arabic through lessons in cultural immersion. So this little crew was traveling around Morocco on the weekends learning how to converse in Arabic. They were an entertaining group, although the girls from Italy and Spain smoked constantly and everywhere, which was really annoying. Curious about the mysterious desert trip I had agreed to, I asked the guy from Georgia, "Is this a camel trip or a 4x4? He shrugged. I asked a couple of the others, and they said they didn't know. I asked, "Well, it includes dinner, right?" "I hope so," the girls giggled and smoked more cigarettes. When everyone was accounted for, we all started walking out of the gate and across the road to where 11 camels lay on the ground waiting for us. I was elated. The camel man helped me climb into the saddle, which was some blankets and rope. The man pointed to a metal bar and said, "Hold on." I thought I was going to go flying off when the camel stood up, but I clung to the bar for dear life and managed to stay on. Oh no, I am not going to be the tourist who falls off a camel. We took off into the desert, the camels plodding effortlessly through the soft sand. The others were shouting and joking. "My camel's the prettiest." My camel is making brown balls. I want to ride backwards. Oh, shut up, I said. Well, I'm trying to have a meditative experience here. The camel climbed up and down the sand dunes. The steeper ones pitched me dangerously forward and backward, but I kept my vow to stay on that camel no matter what. As we traveled, the houses dissolved away, and soon there was nothing in any direction but red sand and deep blue sky. Eventually, the kids quieted down, and there was no sound except for wind and the footsteps of the camels in the sand. I kept looking for signs of a campsite, but there was nothing but sand. Eventually, we came to an area where there was an abundance of camel dropping. The camelmen ordered us all to hold on, and then my camel dropped down to the sand so I could slide off his back. The men tied the camel's front legs together, which enabled them to walk around a little but not get very far. I couldn't decide whether this was inhumane or not, but let's just let it go. The camelmen ran up the side of the dune and disappeared. The students all followed, some having a harder time than others. I started plodding up the sand and realized very quickly that I was getting nowhere fast. Every step I took sunk down deep into the sand and right back down to where I started. For every 3 steps I tried to take, I got about an inch closer to the top. Pulling my legs out of a foot of sand to have them sink back down was also exhausting, and soon I was huffing and puffing, thinking that I would have to spend the night with the camels. Everyone was gone now, and the camelmen were clearly not concerned that one of their party was missing. The Arab leader of the students, Ibrahim, and Morley saw me floundering and came back. Ibrahim grabbed my bag, and Morley asked if I was okay. I struggled to find the breath to say, "Oh, I'm all right." What I really wanted to say was, "Can you please carry me up this sand? I think I may die here." But I didn't. What seemed like an eternity later, I got to the top, and then faced the steep decline on the other side. I thought perhaps I should just lay down and roll. Just as I had caught my breath and sat down at the campsite, one of the camelmen yelled, "Sunset!" and charged up another dune. The kids followed. I was stupid enough to start out after them, then looked up and said, "No way." I plopped myself down in a sand pile and decided this was a perfectly good spot to see the sunset. After the sunset, everyone came down to sit around the tables at the center of the camp. We were served mint tea and peanuts while the camelmen cooked dinner. As the night got darker, plastic bottles with candles inside were brought out so that we could see. The guy from Germany was a surfer with curly blonde hair and a good sense of humor. The girl from England was interesting to talk to, as well as the guy from Italy, although he was kind of quiet. Yusef, the guy from Indonesia, was clearly the class clown, acting goofy and making everyone laugh at his expense. The girls were giggly and loud and interrupted everyone constantly. Still, as the night went on, I was glad that they were all there, as they did add to the experience. We talked until dinner was served, an awesome lamb tagine topped with fried eggs and a fresh chopped cucumber and tomato salad. It was delicious. We played cards for an hour or two, and then the desert wind started blowing hard. We went into one of the tents to continue the game, but it was stuffy and crowded inside. I decided I wanted to go to sleep, and the idea of sleeping on a mattress under the stars as suggested in the tour book stood out in my mind. There was a strong breeze blowing, and it seemed as though it would be nicer than inside the dusty tent with 3 strangers. I looked up at the sky. The lady at the B&B in Medelft had told me that you could see so many stars in the desert. I saw the moon half full and some stars, but I didn't think it was anything so spectacular. After getting a coating of sand blown into my face, I decided it would be best to put my sweatshirt over my head, which actually worked quite well. I soon fell asleep with the students talking and laughing. The conversation sometimes interrupted by a shout of aromatherapy, which was followed by groans and screams about how gross someone was, usually Yusef. So much for the quiet of the desert. Some hours later, I woke up needing to go to the bathroom. I plodded off behind the tent in the cool sand, then got back under my blanket. It was silent now, and I looked up at the sky. The moon had moved on, and now all I saw was thousands and thousands of stars, more than I had ever seen. How could there be this many stars? Large and small, in glowing clusters and sparkling on their own, bright ones and dim ones, infinite and breathtakingly beautiful. I stared for as long as I could, until the sand blew in my eyes, and I had to say goodnight to them forever.
Hello, my name is Rosemary Rule. I was born and raised in the Bronx and now live in Eastchester, and my memoir is entitled My Classmates. I need a little closer. Is that okay? The first one first friend I'm going to discuss is a memoir that I have called A Cookie for Your Thoughts. And this is about my friend Lucille. In the first grade, I met Lucille. When I think of her, I picture a long, smiling face and fingers. Lucille sat at the desk behind me. She wasn't a pretty girl. She had these big brown eyes that kind of bulged out of her head like two giant marbles. The nose and mouth that followed were not flattering, but the glow in her eyes reflected kindness, generosity, and love. School monitors delivered containers of milk and buckets of apples to our classroom every day. After the milk arrived, the teacher took out a large box filled with the most scrumptious cookies in the whole library. At Halloween, the cookies were shaped like pumpkins. At Thanksgiving, they were like turkeys. At Christmas time, they were in the shape of snowmen. And at Easter, they were bunnies. In between holidays, they were sprinkled with sugar, the grams were covered with chocolate, and the sandwich cookie was like having two cookies in one. The art of separating the two halves of the sandwich cookies without breaking either one of the halves and licking off the cream filling became one of my favorite early childhood achievements. The daily appearance of that cookie box was met with mixed emotions. I wanted one of those cookies, but most of the time I didn't have the penny to pay for it. I'd turn around in my seat and find Lucille splitting her sandwich cookie and offering me half. Of course it wasn't the half with the sugar cream filling, but nonetheless, it was a cookie. Sometimes Lucille would give me one of her pennies, and we each have a cookie of our very own. We learn a lot from one another. So many teachers in one small life.
I got another 15 minutes.
My friend Lucille. And now,
Okay.
I come to my friend Carolyn Berry. I can't figure out why, every once in a while, a memory of Carolyn Berry pops into my head. She wasn't one of my friends, merely a classmate. Never really thought about that word before, classmate. What does it mean? Carolyn was a very pretty girl with dark eyes, long black hair, tall, slim, soft-spoken, and a great dancer. I remember our cooking class at PS 78 in the Bronx. It contained 3 complete kitchens plus 2 or 3 instructional cooking units with glass burners on top and utensil-filled cabinets below. Miss Pridmore taught us how to jar preserves and make souffle, but that wasn't what real people ate at my house. There were 4 rooms on the other side of the cooking area, technically 5 counting the bathroom, assimilating every girl's dream home. There was a kitchen, dining room, living room, and bedroom. Believe it or not, we were taught how to set the table, dust and polish furniture, sweep and mop floors, make a bed with hospital corners, and learn the true meaning of elbow grease, whether scrubbing an oven or cleaning a toilet bowl. One day, when the class household chores were done, our teacher said, "Ladies, come gather in the parlor." Not familiar words to my ears. I didn't have a parlor at my house. We called it a living room. I'm sure Miss Pridmore imagined us sitting around chatting while a hostess served us tea and delicate little finger sandwiches. I laughed at the thought of such a make-believe world. On Saturdays, Ma used to listen to the Make-Believe Ballroom Time on radio as she cleaned our house, reminding one of my brothers to stop drinking milk from the bottle and to close the door on the Frigidaire. It took me a while to realize that Frigidaire was actually a refrigerator. There were times when the cupboards were bare and my brothers and I used to make mustard sandwiches, sometimes a ketchup sandwich, and if we were lucky, one with mayonnaise was a real treat. Bread and butter and a cup of coffee was our typical breakfast, except for Sunday, when we would have buns and rolls. I remember on Sunday mornings after Mass stopping at the Melba Bakery and ordering a dozen rolls and a dozen buns. My brother Willie wanted a crumb bun, Dad wanted poppy seed, Mom wanted a cheese, my little brother Joey wanted a jelly donut, and I didn't know what I wanted because I liked all of them. If you didn't ask the lady behind the bakery counter for exactly what you wanted and simply said, "A dozen mixed buns, please," you would undoubtedly end up with a couple of prunes. And nobody liked prunes except maybe Mom. What the heck does all of this have to do with Carolyn?
Getting back to that parlor at school, lucky for us, Miss Bridmore was called away from our class gathering. Left on our own, we decided to entertain ourselves with a little song and dance. It sure would beat some dull chit-chat. Carolyn, usually quite reserved, got up and started singing and dancing, all in the chat. I couldn't believe my eyes and ears. All the other girls started clapping, and Carolyn was cheered on to moving her arms and legs in a rhythm contagious to everyone in the room. As a grand finale, she did a split, a move I couldn't believe another human being could make, and certainly not me. Carolyn was so happy and carefree while she was dancing. Why does that scene play over and over again in my mind? Where is Carolyn today? Why do I think of her and that day at school? I do recall another day. As it comes into focus, I see Miss Kearns, our sewing teacher, ripping out all the basting stitches of Caroline's graduation dress. Can you believe we girls were expected to make our own graduation dresses? Being the kid who couldn't sew buttons, Ma secretly sewed mine at home. That wasn't the case for Carolyn. She'd bring her dress in, and Miss Kearns would undo all her hard work. Tears streamed down Carolyn's face as she watched the beautiful white material turn gray and frayed from being sewed and ripped out so many times. I wondered if there would be enough material left to finish the dress. As Carolyn cried, I wanted to stop Miss Kearns from hurting her. This grumpy old teacher didn't realize that this was one of our class's most prized students. Maybe she couldn't sew very well, but so what? She could dance the ball and the jack like nobody else in the whole wide world. She made me and my classmates very happy.
I'm sorry. See, I was sitting there so quietly, my foot said, oh, I might as well take a nap. Good for it.
Did you rather sit? Would you feel more comfortable sitting down?
No.
Right, you understand?
I'm fine. All right, now that I've made all that fuss, my name is Gilda DiMaio. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, the home of the great Brooklyn Dodgers. Dom DeLuise, if anybody remembers him. Tony Bennett. And the magnificent Brian Rich. At any rate, my memoir is called The Perks of the Job. At the age of 18, working for a large company in Midtown Manhattan was a dream come true. I had been traveling to Manhattan from Brooklyn for 4 years to Washington Irving High School, but this was the best. Ideal Publishers were located in a beautiful building on Madison Avenue at 41st Street. I carried my large black portfolio when I was interviewed shortly after high school graduation. I was hoping the art director would find my work suitable. I had studied commercial art and they needed someone to do layout and lettering. I was hired then and there, and I was riding on cloud 9. The company published 3 magazines, Movie Star Parade, Movie Life, and Modern Romances. So then I treated myself to lunch. Chock full of Nuts was located at the next corner on 40th Street. I indulged in my favorite sandwich, cream cheese and walnuts on cinnamon raisin bread, and a sugared whole wheat donut. They don't sell that anymore. Ideal was located close to many fine stores on Fifth Avenue. To name a few,
Franklin Simon, Best and Company, Lord and Taylor. Many a lunch hour was spent browsing. The office consisted of a small but close-knit staff. There was Lily Bishop, our receptionist, and knitter extraordinaire. Ed Rethorn, art director, and Tony Shargus, Travis Client, Laura Brett, Marion McLean, and myself. Mr. William Cotton was the publisher. Lily taught Marion and I, and me, cable stitch and how to knit socks, and much more. Marion and I still speak about every 6 months or so. She married a doctor and has lived in Maryland on a large farm all these years. We spent many evenings at the USO dancing with servicemen from all over. This was during our time at Ideal Publishers. The clubs were in Manhattan, and we both traveled to Brooklyn on the subway for home. Our days were long and busy, but we had fun and became good friends. In 1942, Sal worked for a jeweler on 47th and 6th Avenue before he joined the Navy. We would meet for lunch and dinner many times a week. At Ideal Publishers, I was given free tickets for movies at the Strand or Paramount Theater. We took advantage of these perks. There was a restaurant located downstairs of the Paramount Theater. Sal and I went there often. There was dinner and dancing with a live orchestra playing very good swing music. And Sal was a great Lindy dancer. Located by the Strand Theater was Jack Dempsey's restaurant. We treated ourselves to roast beef sandwiches sitting at the bar. Dinner was out of reach. At 42nd and 6th Avenue, near Stern's department store, there was a Chinese restaurant. Up one flight of stairs, and you could feast on a delicious lunch at 85 cents. Oh my God. This was naturally a favorite. I had been working at Ideal for about 1 year when Ed Rethorn, our art director, chose me to be his assistant. I was very excited, to say the least. I accompanied Ed to photo shoots, and we went to eat lunch after each one. He took me to a Japanese restaurant as well. I had never tasted Japanese food. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know those existed. We enjoyed leisurely lunches, and sometimes he would use me in some of the shoots, mostly featuring pictures of my hair worn in a pageboard. My hair was very thick at that time and photographed very well. Learning more about different art was my goal. The Art Students League, Pratt Institute, and Columbia University offered many evening classes. I enrolled in many of these as they were offered after 5 at night. After a quick sandwich, classes began. During this time, I also did freelance work. There was a cooperative restaurant on 39th Street that wanted a poster advertising new menus every week. All in all, I kept busy, especially since Sal had joined the Navy. Mr. Cotton was a generous employer. He owned a large estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Each year, he invited the staff for a full day of fun at his home. The barbecue buffet was held around a huge pool. It was a sumptuous feast. The pool lockers and showers were indoor. On the property, there was a horse stable and a large game room. We were encouraged to enjoy it all. One year, we were asked to bring costumes we made and encouraged to be creative. I do have a picture somewhere. Marion, a tall person, was dressed as a baby. I rigged up a costume made from the covers of our magazine and some kind of a goofy hat. Tony Shargus won the prize, but I can't remember his creation. Mr. Cotton and his family joined us and made us feel very welcome at all times. He was a true gem. During my tenure at IDEO, we had a number of exciting days. At times, actors came in to say hello. This was the piece de resistance. Meeting Eddie Bracken, who was featured in Mr. Ed, was awesome. He was so congenial and funny and greeted all of us as if we were friends. Gregory Peck, a favorite of mine, was in the city promoting his new hit, Keys of the Kingdom. He was a handsome man, and I was thrilled to meet him. His gracious demeanor was special, and he was so down to earth. You never know a star's true persona. June Allison was as bubbly as she was on the screen, and prettier, I thought, as well. I was young and a bit starstruck at the time, and felt fortunate to be working for this special company. The 4 years that I worked for IDEO Publisher seemed to fly by. I was married and expecting my first child when I retired to begin a new chapter in my life, right here in Tuckahoe.
I believe that concludes the program. However, we do have a reception, and if you would like to join our group, it meets the first Thursday of every month. All right? And attendance is required. We're very strict about attendance because it's the interaction of the group that makes the group so very, very special. And as you can see, it's absolutely pleasurable to listen to these memoirs, or I call them stories. And I was just thinking with Gilda that all those wonderful department stores are gone. The only one that she mentioned that remains is Lord & Taylor. And how sad that our young children don't have that kind of experience that we had. So now,
Thank you, Edith, and thank you, everyone. I'd like to invite, we are very happy to have Mayor Eklund and Trustee Steve Quigley with us. I want to invite them.
Thank you very much. And, it's such a pleasure to be, how are you today, Mary? Such a pleasure to be here every year, and I really enjoy your stories. I'm going to be thinking tonight about that slug that went down your sink. I'll tell my son about that story when I get home. But wonderful stories. Great. I especially love the stories about Old Tuckahoe.
True stories.
Of course. But there was one comment you made about the Itch, the old theater in Tuckahoe. I just want to tell you that recently I had a meeting with the developer who's going to be developing that large construction site up where the gas station is on Upper Main Street. And there's a new developer who's taken on that project, and he said that they were doing some fact-finding on Tuckahoe, and they were trying to come up with a new name for the project. And he asked me, he said, what do you think about the Lyric? We're thinking about calling the project the Lyric. And I said, well, I think it's a great idea. So, and of course, it's from the old theater, The Itch. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So, but thanks again for having me. And of course, I'm here with our trustee, again, newly elected. We're very happy, so Steve Quigley. And he is also the liaison to the library, so I'll let him say a word or two.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not a native of Tuckahoe or this area. I've only been here for 27 years, and I still feel like one of the new kids on the block. So it's really great for me to hear some of these stories, and also to tie in some of the stories. My mother grew up in Manhattan, and then when she got married, they moved to Western New York, where I grew up. So some of those old stores were mentioned, and some of the old New York stories were stories that I would hear from her as well. And so that was just great memories for me. And the last thing, my son's about to graduate from college this year as an English major, so I get to read some of his essays and learn what they're teaching in the colleges right now. And then to hear these stories is just to hear what good writing is really pleasurable. So thank you very much.
Keep up the good work. Thank you.
again, thank you everyone for coming. We all had a
To Maddie, congrats on paying off all those student loans.
Finally, right?
How'd you manage that anyway?
I started tracking my spending, changed a couple of habits.
Wow, I'm kind of living paycheck to paycheck right now. I don't even know how I'm doing it.
Well, have you tried saving a little?
I want to, but where's that money gonna come from? Bill collectors, they're the worst. Am I right?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind.
Not home.
Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org.